Every economist since Adam Smith has tried to build economic science on shifting sand, statistics, mathematical models, behavioral assumptions that change with fashion. They observe, they measure, they predict, and they fail catastrophically, again and again. The 2008 crisis, the inflation of the 1970s, the Great Depression, all unforeseen by mainstream economics, yet all perfectly explicable through one simple, unshakable foundation. There exists one axiom so fundamental, so absolutely certain, that no human being can deny it without contradicting themselves in the very act of denial. This axiom doesn't come from surveys or laboratory experiments. It cannot be refuted by statistics or amended by committee. It is more solid than any physical law because it stems from the very nature of conscious, purposeful beings. This single axiom revolutionized my understanding of economic science and made it possible to build the only truly scientific approach to economics, praxeology. While other economists chase data and trends, this axiom provides the logical foundation for understanding all economic phenomena, from the simplest market exchange to the most complex financial crisis. Today, I'll reveal this axiom that transformed not just my work, but the entire possibility of economics as genuine science. You'll discover why this foundation makes Austrian economics unassailable, while every other school stumbles in logical quicksand. Chapter 1: The Foundation That Cannot Crumble. The axiom that revolutionized economic science is deceptively simple: human beings act purposefully. That's it. Humans act. Every conscious person seeks to achieve ends through means, moving from less satisfactory to more satisfactory conditions according to their own understanding. This appears almost trivial until you grasp its profound implications. This axiom is absolutely certain, more certain than any empirical observation, more solid than any mathematical theorem. Why? Because anyone who attempts to deny it must use purposeful action to make their denial. They must choose words, organize thoughts, communicate their disagreement, all purposeful acts that prove the very proposition they're trying to refute. You cannot conduct a scientific experiment to test whether humans act purposefully. The very design and execution of such an experiment would demonstrate purposeful action. You cannot gather statistics to prove or disprove it. The collection and analysis of data requires purposeful human action. This axiom transcends empirical verification because it is the logical prerequisite for all empirical investigation. From this bedrock certainty, we can deduce the entire structure of economic science through pure logic. If humans act purposefully, then they must rank their preferences. They cannot pursue all ends simultaneously with equal intensity. If they rank preferences, then they must economize, allocate scarce means among competing ends. If they economize, then every action involves choice, and every choice involves sacrifice of alternatives. This logical deduction reveals why mathematics cannot capture economic reality. Human action involves choice, preference, expectation, qualities that resist quantification. You cannot mathematically model the entrepreneur's flash of insight or the consumer's change of heart. These are logical categories of action, not measurable quantities. While other economists build elaborate mathematical models that crumble at the first contact with reality, we build from logical bedrock. When Keynesians predicted prosperity from government spending, Praxeology revealed why this violated the logic of human action. When monetarists claimed they could fine-tune the economy through money supply manipulation, our axiom exposed why central planning is logically impossible. This axiom makes economics a science, not by imitating physics, but by discovering the logical laws that govern human action. Chapter 2: Why Other Schools Fail. Every competing school of economics violates the fundamental axiom of human action, which explains their systematic failures. They treat humans as passive objects rather than purposeful actors. leading to theories that collapse under logical scrutiny. Keynesian economics assumes government officials can calculate what private actors cannot, how much to spend, save, and invest for optimal economic outcomes. This violates our axiom because it denies that individuals act purposefully based on their own knowledge and preferences. If humans truly act purposefully, then no external authority can possess the dispersed information necessary to coordinate their actions better than they can coordinate themselves. The Keynesian multiplier effect exemplifies this error. It assumes that when government spends money, this creates additional rounds of spending with mathematical precision. But purposeful action means each recipient of government funds will act according to their own plans and preferences, not according to some mechanical formula. Some will save, others will pay debts, still others will alter their consumption patterns. The neat mathematical progression dissolves into the complexity of human purpose. Chicago School economics commits a different but equally fatal error. They acknowledge that humans act purposefully, but then assume this purpose can be reduced to mathematical optimization problems. They model humans as calculating machines that process infinite information instantaneously to maximize utility functions. This mechanistic view misses the essential uncertainty and creativity that characterizes genuine human action. Real entrepreneurs don't solve equations, they exercise judgment under uncertainty. They cannot calculate optimal outcomes because the future doesn't yet exist to be calculated. They must interpret unclear signals, imagine new possibilities, and commit resources based on hunches and vision. This creative aspect of human action cannot be captured in mathematical models, no matter how sophisticated. Marxist economics makes perhaps the most fundamental error by treating economic relationships as expressions of class struggle rather than voluntary exchanges between purposeful individuals. This completely inverts reality. Workers and employers, buyers and sellers don't engage in zero-sum conflict. They cooperate through market exchange to achieve their respective purposes. Each party benefits, or the exchange wouldn't occur. Socialist economics of all varieties stumbles on the calculation problem precisely because it ignores purposeful human action. Without market prices generated by voluntary exchanges, economic planners cannot rationally allocate resources. They lack the information that only emerges from the actions of purposeful individuals pursuing their own ends through market transactions. The axiom of human action reveals why these schools fail. They build theories that contradict the very nature of the beings whose behavior they attempt to explain. Chapter 3: Logical Deduction versus Empirical Confusion. Here's where economics diverges completely from the physical sciences, and why most economists have led themselves astray by inappropriate methodological borrowing. In physics, you observe phenomena and construct theories to explain your observations. In economics, you must start with the logical structure of human action and deduce the laws that govern purposeful behavior. Consider the difference between a falling rock and a purchasing decision. The rock follows gravitational laws that can be measured, predicted, and expressed mathematically. The human purchaser follows the laws of logic. They cannot simultaneously prefer A to B and B to A. They cannot pursue contradictory ends with the same means. They cannot act without preferring the expected result of action to inaction. These logical laws are more certain than any physical law because they stem from the structure of rational thought itself. We might discover that our understanding of gravity was incomplete, but we cannot discover that purposeful action violates the law of non-contradiction. Physical laws describe what usually happens. Logical laws describe what must happen for thought and action to be coherent. This is why I developed praxeology as the proper method for economic science. We don't need to conduct experiments to know that when people value money more than goods, they tend to save. When they value goods more than money, they tend to spend. This follows logically from the axiom of purposeful action. We don't need statistical studies to know that price controls create shortages when set below market prices. This violates the logic of human action by preventing people from coordinating their plans through voluntary exchange. Watch how empirical economists constantly contradict themselves. They observe that minimum wage laws correlate with unemployment, but then claim correlation isn't causation. They measure the effects of inflation but cannot explain why it occurs or predict when it will end. They document business cycles but offer contradictory theories about their causes. Why? Because they're trying to apply physical science methods to logical science subject matter. Empirical data doesn't interpret itself. The same statistical correlation can support opposite theories depending on your underlying assumptions about human action. Praxeology provides the logical framework for interpreting data correctly. Without understanding why humans act, you cannot understand what their actions mean. The superiority of logical deduction becomes clear in economic prediction. While empirical economists failed to anticipate major crises, Austrian economists consistently warned of bubbles, inflation, and financial instability by applying praxeological principles. We don't predict specific prices or exact timing, those depend on changing human valuations. We predict the logical consequences of violating economic principles, and these predictions prove remarkably accurate. Take a moment to observe this principle in your daily life. Notice how your own actions follow logical patterns even when external conditions vary unpredictably. Chapter 4: The Impossibility of Economic Planning. The axiom of human action reveals why socialist economic planning is not merely difficult or inefficient, it is logically impossible. This isn't a political opinion or empirical observation, it's a logical deduction from the nature of purposeful human action. Economic planning requires knowledge that cannot exist. Planners must know what millions of people want, what resources are available, what production methods are most efficient, and how all these factors will change over time. But this information doesn't exist in any central location, it exists only in the dispersed minds of purposeful actors as they make decisions based on their individual circumstances and preferences. Consider a simple example: determining how many shoes to produce. This seems straightforward until you realize that shoes encompasses thousands of variations in style, size, material, and quality. Consumer preferences for these variations change constantly based on fashion, weather, income, age, and countless other factors. No planner can possibly know which specific shoes each person wants at each moment. In a market economy, this coordination happens automatically through the price system. When consumers want more of certain shoes, retailers order more, driving up demand and prices for relevant materials and labor. These price signals guide producers to shift resources toward higher-valued uses without any central direction. Each purposeful actor responds to price information that reflects the actions of all other market participants. Socialist planning destroys this information system. Without market prices, planners cannot calculate the relative costs and benefits of different resource allocations. They might know they need steel, but they cannot rationally determine whether steel is more urgently needed for automobiles, buildings, or machinery. Each decision becomes arbitrary because they lack the price signals that embody the preferences and actions of purposeful individuals. The calculation problem deepens with capital goods, machinery, equipment, and other tools used in production. These don't have directly observable consumer demand, their value derives from their contribution to producing consumer goods. In markets, interest rates and profit expectations guide investment in capital goods. Planners have no rational method for determining which capital investments will best serve human purposes. Even perfect information wouldn't solve the planning problem because human action is creative and unpredictable. Entrepreneurs don't just respond to existing preferences, they imagine new products, discover new methods, and create previously unimagined possibilities. Planning assumes the future is predictable and controllable, but purposeful action means the future emerges from the choices of creative human beings. The Soviet Union's collapse wasn't accidental. It was the inevitable result of trying to organize economic activity without respecting the logical requirements of human action. Venezuelan shortages, Cuban poverty, North Korean starvation, all follow necessarily from the attempt to replace purposeful individual action with bureaucratic planning. This isn't a critique of socialist intentions but a demonstration of logical impossibility. Even benevolent, omniscient planners could not solve the calculation problem because the required information emerges only from market processes. Chapter 5: How Prices Emerge from Human Action. The price system represents one of humanity's greatest discoveries, though most people don't realize it was discovered rather than invented. Prices aren't arbitrary numbers set by governments or corporations. They emerge spontaneously from the logical structure of human action itself. When two people engage in voluntary exchange, they reveal information about their relative valuations. If I trade my apple for your orange, this demonstrates that I value your orange more than my apple, while you value my apple more than your orange. Each exchange reveals preference rankings that existed in our minds but were previously unobservable to others. Multiply this simple process by millions of daily exchanges, and you generate the entire price structure that coordinates economic activity across the globe. Each price reflects the accumulated choices of countless purposeful actors, creating an information system more sophisticated than any computer network. Consider how the price of copper coordinates global economic activity. When smartphone manufacturers increase production, they demand more copper, bidding up its price. This higher price signals copper miners to increase production, while simultaneously encouraging electronics manufacturers to use copper more efficiently or find substitutes. Jewelry makers might delay purchases, while recyclers find it profitable to extract copper from old products. No central authority coordinates these adjustments. Each actor responds purposefully to price signals that reflect the combined actions of all other market participants. The system coordinates the activities of millions of people who never communicate directly, speak different languages, and live on different continents. Price formation reveals why the axiom of human action is so powerful. Prices couldn't exist without purposeful action. Random or mechanical behavior cannot generate meaningful exchange ratios. Prices embody human purposes, preferences, and expectations in numerical form, making economic calculation possible. This explains why price controls are so destructive. When government sets maximum prices below market levels, it prevents the price system from communicating essential information. Suppliers cannot cover their costs, so they reduce production. Consumers see artificially low prices as signals to increase consumption. The inevitable result is shortage, not because there's insufficient productive capacity, but because the information system has been disrupted. Interest rates represent perhaps the most important prices in the economy because they coordinate actions across time. When people prefer consumption today over consumption tomorrow, they're willing to pay interest to borrow. When they prefer future consumption, they're willing to lend at interest. Interest rates balance these temporal preferences, guiding investment and consumption decisions. Federal Reserve manipulation of interest rates disrupts this temporal coordination just as price controls disrupt spatial coordination. Artificially low interest rates make borrowing appear cheaper than it really is and saving less attractive than it should be. This creates unsustainable booms followed by necessary corrections. Observe this principle around you. Notice how prices change in response to changing conditions, and how these changes influence your own decisions without any central direction. The price system demonstrates the creative power of human action to generate spontaneous order, complex coordination without conscious design. Chapter 6: Spontaneous Order versus Designed Chaos. The axiom of human action reveals one of the most profound insights in social science. The most complex and beneficial social institutions arise spontaneously from individual actions, not from collective design. This principle demolishes the myth that social order requires central planning. Language exemplifies spontaneous order perfectly. No committee designed English grammar or decided which words should mean what. Language evolved through countless individual actions, people communicating, adopting useful terms, modifying pronunciations, developing new expressions. The result is a communication system more sophisticated than any planned language, continuously adapting to serve human purposes. The same process creates market institutions. Money evolved from barter as traders discovered that certain commodities facilitated exchange. Gold became money not because governments declared it, but because its properties, durability, divisibility, portability, made it superior for monetary purposes. Banking, insurance, corporate organization, all emerged from purposeful individual actions seeking to solve practical problems. Consider how markets coordinate production without central direction. When you buy coffee, you set in motion a global network of activities. Farmers plant coffee beans, ships transport them, roasters process them, retailers stock them, all because each actor pursues their own purposes through voluntary exchange. No master plan coordinates this activity, yet coffee appears reliably on store shelves. This spontaneous coordination works because each person specializes in what they do best, guided by price signals and profit opportunities. The farmer doesn't need to understand international shipping or retail marketing. The retailer doesn't need to know how to grow coffee. Each focuses on their comparative advantage while depending on others to fulfill their specialized roles. Contrast this with government attempts to design social order. Central planners assume they can improve on spontaneous processes by conscious design. They create bureaucracies to coordinate activities that markets handle automatically. They pass laws to solve problems that voluntary associations address more effectively. They design welfare systems that destroy the social networks that traditionally provided mutual aid. The results are predictable. Design systems are rigid, expensive, and counterproductive. They cannot adapt quickly to changing circumstances because adaptation requires committee approval rather than individual initiative. They cannot process the dispersed information that guides market coordination because information must flow through bureaucratic hierarchies rather than price signals. Government regulation typically destroys spontaneous order while claiming to improve it. Financial regulations intended to prevent fraud create barriers that prevent honest competition. Environmental regulations designed to protect nature prevent property owners from conservation efforts that would actually protect their land. Educational regulations meant to ensure quality prevent innovative teaching methods that might better serve students. The axiom of human action explains why spontaneous order works. People acting purposefully will develop institutions that serve their purposes better than institutions imposed by force. Voluntary institutions must satisfy participants or they'll be abandoned. Coercive institutions persist regardless of their effectiveness because exit isn't permitted. This doesn't mean spontaneous order is perfect, it means it's perfectible. When voluntary institutions fail to serve human purposes, people modify or replace them. When coercive institutions fail, they typically expand their power rather than improve their performance. Understanding spontaneous order transforms how you view social problems. Instead of asking, "What should government do?" ask, "How can voluntary action solve this more effectively?" Chapter 7: Practical Applications of the Axiom. The axiom of human action isn't just philosophical speculation, it provides practical guidance for understanding current economic and political issues. Let me show you how this fundamental principle illuminates contemporary American challenges. Take inflation, which government officials consistently misdiagnose and mismanage. Mainstream economists treat inflation as a mysterious force that sometimes appears without clear cause. But the axiom of human action reveals inflation's logical structure. When the money supply increases faster than the demand for money, people will bid up prices as they try to exchange increasingly abundant money for relatively scarce goods. This isn't a statistical correlation, it's a logical necessity. If people prefer goods to money, which they must, since money serves no purpose except to exchange for goods, then increasing the money supply without proportionally increasing goods must result in higher prices. The Federal Reserve's money creation inevitably creates inflation, regardless of their intentions or their sophisticated economic models. Consider the current housing crisis through the lens of human action. Government officials blame greedy developers and predatory landlords, but purposeful action analysis reveals the real culprits: zoning laws that prevent construction, rent controls that discourage maintenance and new supply, and Federal Reserve policies that inflate asset prices beyond what working families can afford. Developers want to build housing because profitable construction serves their purposes. Landlords want to rent to reliable tenants because steady rental income serves their purposes. When housing shortages persist despite these powerful incentives, look for government interventions that prevent purposeful actors from serving their mutual interests through voluntary exchange. The labor market provides another clear example. Minimum wage laws allegedly help workers, but the axiom of human action reveals why they actually harm low-skilled workers. Employers will hire workers only when the expected value of their production exceeds their wage costs. Artificially raising wage costs above productivity levels makes employment unprofitable, forcing employers to eliminate positions or substitute machines for workers. This isn't employer greed, it's logical necessity. Even the most benevolent employer cannot sustainably pay workers more than they produce without eventually going bankrupt. Minimum wage laws don't change this economic reality, they just make it illegal for low-skilled workers to offer their services at prices employers can afford. Healthcare costs illustrate how government intervention creates the problems it claims to solve. Insurance regulations require coverage for services many people don't want, raising costs for everyone. Licensing laws prevent qualified practitioners from offering services, reducing supply and increasing prices. Tax policies favor employer-provided insurance over direct payment, hiding true costs from consumers and removing price pressure. Each intervention violates the logic of human action by preventing voluntary coordination between patients, providers, and payers. The result is a system that satisfies no one, costs too much, delivers too little, and frustrates everyone involved. Understanding human action helps you evaluate policy proposals logically rather than emotionally. Don't ask whether politicians have good intentions, ask whether their proposals respect or violate the logical requirements of purposeful human action. Policies that work with human nature will succeed, policies that fight human nature will create unintended consequences regardless of good intentions. In your personal life, apply this principle by recognizing that sustainable solutions must align with human purposes rather than fight them. Conclusion. The axiom of human action, that conscious beings act purposefully to improve their circumstances, provides the unshakable foundation for genuine economic science. This simple truth, more certain than any empirical observation, allows us to build a complete understanding of economic phenomena through pure logical deduction. While other economists chase statistical correlations and construct mathematical models that crumble at first contact with reality, we build from bedrock certainty. The laws of human action are as reliable as the laws of logic because they are laws of logic. They describe the necessary structure of rational thought and purposeful behavior. This axiom reveals why socialism fails, why government intervention creates the problems it attempts to solve, and why free markets generate spontaneous order more complex and beneficial than any design system. It explains the price system, the impossibility of economic calculation under socialism, and the inevitable consequences of violating economic principles. Most importantly, this axiom transforms economics from political opinion into genuine science. You don't need to accept my conclusions on faith, you can verify them through logical reasoning from premises you cannot deny without self-contradiction. The truth will prevail because logical principles ultimately govern human action, regardless of political fashion or academic consensus. Those who understand these principles will navigate economic reality more successfully than those who fight against logical necessity. Study the foundations of human action. Apply praxeological reasoning to current events. Defend logical principles against emotional appeals and political pressure. The science of human action provides the intellectual tools for preserving economic freedom and human prosperity against all forms of collectivist error. Reality has a way of vindicating logical truth, even when political forces temporarily obscure it.